Okay, hello everybody. How's my audio? Does this work? All right, thank you. Thank you for being here, especially since the sun has now come out, so we are competing with a beautiful day in Perugia. My name is Vivian Schiller. I am Executive Director of Aspen Digital. We are a program of the Aspen Institute that focuses on technology and media, but I have a long track record in news media, including being at a bunch of places, including CNN, NPR, New York Times, NBC, Discovery, and Twitter. We are here today with an absolutely fantastic panel to talk about, I know there's been a lot of sessions and conversations here in Perugia about AI. A lot of it is how AI is going to come, how it's going to get us, how it's going to steal from us, how it's going to further destroy journalism. So we wanted to do something, and all those things may very well be true. However, what we're going to do for the next 50 minutes is look at some of the ways that news media can embrace AI to serve our fundamental purpose, which is to inform and inspire our audience with information that they need in order to participate in society. And there are many, many ways that we can think about using AI in our newsrooms, in the ways that we developed products and other public-facing tools, in the ways that we engage with audiences, in our revenue models. There are, like I said, just many exciting opportunities, and that's what we're going to talk about. So we have with us really fantastic folks who think about this and work on this a lot. All the way at the end, actually I'm going to start immediately to my right. Julie Pace, or in Italy she is Julie Pace, as it's meant to be pronounced, is a Senior Vice President and Executive Editor of the Associated Press, leading global news coverage for more than 100 countries. Under Julie, the AP has expanded its digital news offering. I know it's been experimenting a lot with AI, we'll talk about that, but has also been awarded 2 Pulitzer Prizes and produced an award-winning documentary on the Ukraine, which won an Oscar recently. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And I know you were, yes, huge. And the BAFTA, have the BAFTAs happened yet? I should
You won a BAFTA and an Oscar.
Won the BAFTA yet, okay, congratulations. Next is Charlie Beckett, who is the founding director of Polis, which is the journalism think tank in the School of Media and Communications at the London School of Economics. Actually, it's the London School of Economics and Political Science. Best known to most of us as LSE. He leads Polis LSE's Journalism AI project. They published an absolutely fantastic report, which I think has been updated now several times, if I'm not mistaken. And he himself is an award-winning filmmaker and editor at the BBC, ITN's Channel 4 News. And finally, Chris Moran is the Guardian's head of editorial innovation. And he uses data in the newsroom to create all kinds of projects. Chris is truly a wizard and is the bridge between editorial and product, identifying opportunities for new features and ideas that capture the unique voice and values of The Guardian. He also created the famous, and if you don't know about this, you really must, OFAN, which is The Guardian's real-time analytics tool, and it's just industry-leading. I guess I should disclose that I'm a member of the Scott Trust, so I'm a little bit, which owns The Guardian, so I'm a little bit biased towards The Guardian, although I also love the AP and every other news organization that I've ever worked at or consumed. Okay. Those disclosures are out of the way. So we're going to do a little show and tell this morning. You've heard a lot of blah, 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 so now we're going to show you stuff. And then we'll do some blah, blah, blah. Chris, we're going to start with you.
Great.
Hopefully the tech will work.
Yeah, thanks, Vivian. You're going to see me balancing my laptop on my lap in a minute and trying to hold a microphone at the same time, which might be a challenge too far. So at The Guardian, I guess the important thing to say is we've been very lucky in that our ExCo have been really supportive in our initial drive around generative AI, which I'm the editorial lead on, in terms of allowing us to go through a period of research and development. So the things that I'm going to show you are not deployed, but they are part of the process we've been through in terms of experimenting with what is possible with this technology and trying to find the edges of what it means to deploy it responsibly within journalism. The other crucial thing to say is, whilst I'm the person up here talking, I am not solely responsible for all this work, to say the least. We have a small but really perfectly formed team, a couple of engineers, Joe and Ellen, Nathan Good on the product side, and 3 brilliant data science people as well. And the thing that characterizes this group of people, and the thing that has made my life very joyful for the last year is, aside from their professional excellence, all of them are curious, interested, and keen to learn from one another. And I think anybody working in this space needs a group of people like this. So the first thing I'm going to show you is called Guillemot. And it's called Guillemot because that's about the best pun we could make up from Guardian and LLMs. And this goes back to when I first started playing with GPT when it first came out, very much inspired by people like David Caswell. And it struck me that the thing I needed to do was start throwing journalistic use cases at the LLM to see what it could do. And fundamentally, I realized that I was doing the same thing over and over again. I was copying and pasting a Guardian article and shoving it into the LLM underneath a prompt that I'd written. So I went to Joe, who was at that time the only engineer working on this, and I said, I'd really like you to make that easier for me. I want to be able to experiment with prompting. And what I'm about to show you is not a tech powerhouse. It's really simple tech, but I think instructive in terms of the way that we've approached it. Basically, it is a Chrome extension attached to a back end. And whenever I go to a Guardian article, I can click it, and then I can execute one of a bunch of prompts that I have written and refined over the last year. And it immediately made it much more easy for me to start understanding the edges of this technology. If you're working within a context that you understand and you're trying to prompt it to do something, then you're quite well placed to judge the output and whether or not you're going in the right direction. And the thing that struck me as well was, if it was useful for me to experiment with, then it was also going to be useful possibly for people in the newsroom to experiment with, but crucially for me to be able to show those people how it worked as well and get their feedback. So in effect, we ended up creating a kind of experimental playground and what you might call a prompt management system. So this is a little video. This is me on a Guardian article yesterday about Brexit, the gift that keeps on giving. And I click the cute little Guillemot icon, and it loads up a palette of prompts. And in this case, I'm going to ask it to create a news headline based on this piece. I click it, and I get 5 particular suggestions here. But one of the interesting things about Guillemot is we want to teach people how it works. So you can click on the prompt button so that everybody in the newsroom can see exactly what I'm asking this thing to do. And in this case, you can see it's actually quite an elaborate prompt, right? What I'm saying is, a news headline is this, a news headline is this for The Guardian. This is the kind of way I want you to think about it. Here are some specific examples. And then at the bottom, it also shows you exactly what the text is that you are asking it to work on. But there are lots of different news headlines, right? So this piece is a much lighter piece of news about a fossil. And in this case, instead of choosing the straight news headline option, what I'm picking is light news headline and pressing the button again. And in this case, it's going to be a lot more playful. Not all of these are perfect, but I rather like Jurassic Lark. I think that's quite fun. And again, when you click on the prompt button, as somebody in the newsroom, you start to get an understanding of the kind of changes I've made to this prompt as distinct from the much stricter news headline. Here I'm actively asking it to be playful. Try puns. Here's some example of puns. We're not reaching here for the perfect headline. We're reaching for a set of headlines that might inspire somebody working in this space. And I think that's the other thing I really want to talk about here. So this tool is not deployed at The Guardian. Our sub-editors are not actively using it, but what we are doing is consulting with them now and starting to consult more widely about whether this is good. I want those operational people to tell me whether it's useful, trustworthy, accurate, interesting, and Also, I want to start thinking, if you were to deploy this in a tooling system, you have to think really creatively about it, because there's a very big difference, for example, from having a CMS which, when the body copy is pasted in, it immediately gives you one headline in the field, and another approach which might be, you can click a button if you want some help, and then it shows you a palette of 5 rather than just the one pure headline. So there's a whole host of kind of cultural thinking around this that you need to do, and also fundamentally you need to understand what you're trying to achieve. Here you can see it doing something with a rather more feature-length kind of article. But you can do more. So this stuff is amazing at just transforming things. So in this case, I've picked up an excellent piece of exclusive journalism about Kharkiv from Dan Saber. And here, what I'm going to show you is what we call at the moment the at-a-glance prompt. And all I've done is I've taught it a really strict, quite condensed summary in a very specific form. And here you can see it. It's broken it down into the top line there. And there's a section saying, why should I care? Then the key details. And as you scroll down, it starts to get more interesting as well. You can see what's happening on the ground. And further down, I think it creates a section called Voices from Kharkiv. But there's something really interesting here, right? Which is, I think about 2 weeks ago, GPT updated GPT-4 Turbo. And previous to that, this prompt always worked in exactly the same way. It gave me exactly the headings that I asked for. But since that moment, it has started to be more creative. It started creating its own variations on the format. That's really interesting in understanding that this is a creative tool, but if you're in a news organization, do you definitely want it to do that? And can you be certain that you can control it? Are interesting questions. Again, I want to be absolutely clear. We have never published an article generated by this prompt, and we are not likely to in the near future. But it kind of starts to, I hope, explain how we're thinking about communicating to the newsroom and trying to pull in expert operational views on whether or not this stuff is working well. I've got one last thing, it's quick if that's all right. This is Sheila Pullum, and she is one of our managing editors. And if she knew that I was showing you this picture of her, she would be really mortified. But there is a good reason why I'm doing it. She was particularly important in the creation of the latest version of our editorial code of practice, which is obviously an internal document, but it's also public. And what I did here was, I couldn't look at her name without taking advantage of it. So this is Pullum, and it's just a GPT. All I've done is I've given the GPT this document, and I've asked it to respond to questions about the document and try and limit its answers to the document. And in this instance here, I've said, my source just paid for my lunch without me realizing what should I do, and it's given me a really excellent response, pulling in a lot of different ideas and concepts from within the editorial code of practice. One of the reasons I really like this is because, depending on your Wi-Fi, it does also work as an audio experience on your phone. So, fingers crossed. I'm reporting from a hospital today. What do I need to bear in mind?
When reporting from a hospital, it's crucial to handle the situation with sensitivity and respect for privacy. Ensure you identify yourself as a journalist and obtain permission from a responsible executive before entering non-public areas. The restrictions on privacy.
And so on. And I think what's interesting about this is you do need to be aware that this isn't always perfectly accurate. But in this case, I think what it does is it takes a document which might not always be available to the reporter, and it puts that information right in your pocket when you're out in the field in a really interesting way. And I think there's a load of other applications around that area. If you take any kind of public document, think about MP's code of conduct, regulations in whatever country you're in, I think there are some really exciting things you can do with it.
Why does Pullum speak with an American accent?
I can't make it speak with an English accent yet.
And is this just a quick follow-up, because we want to get onto it, and I have a lot more questions, but we'll get onto the other presentations. So these tools are now available as an experiment to the entire newsroom?
So what we're doing at the moment is, if, for example, we're working on a prompt and we just want to know whether or not it's good from the people who actually work in that area, we can very easily give them access to it so that they can give us feedback.
So you're rolling it out slowly.
We've also got a group of 16 people from very different disciplines across the newsroom with very different views on AI who also have access to it and are being encouraged to play with it. But nobody is using it to create headlines right now.
Understood, thank you. Okay, we'll come back with more questions soon. Julie.
Thank you. Is this our clicker here?
This is our clicker, and in the back they should be able to pull up your presentation.
Excellent.
Wow, amazing.
Well, it's great to be here with all of you, and I think the fact that somebody who is in my role leading daily journalism is on a panel about AI and can speak about it with even some fluency just goes to speak to the fact that this is something that is just really ubiquitous in our newsroom and so many newsrooms right now and really important to our future. So I thought I would just start, for those who may not be familiar, with a quick overview of who we are at the Associated Press. We are a fact-based, independent, not-for-profit, nonpartisan news organization that is 177 years young. I always think that last line is a bit cheesy, but it's the corporate branding, so here we are. The reason, though, that I point out that we are 177 years old in the context of this conversation is that you don't get to be a news organization that survives, and I would argue thrives, for 177 years without adapting to technology. It's just impossible to think about everything that has sort of happened in the course of our history without thinking about all of the adaptations that we have had to make. And I think one of the things that people may not realize about the Associated Press is that we've been using AI in our news report for more than a decade. Think about that, for more than a decade. Some of those use cases are things that are now just very routine to what we do every day. Things like using AI to automate earnings reports, sports scores, and we did all of that, and we're quite proud of this. We did all of that without eliminating human journalists. We were just able to take those journalists and move them from those really rote tasks that were quite time-consuming and moving them onto things that really only a human journalist can do, being out in the field, adding additional analysis and context to our report. We've also been using AI in our search tools to make our content, this vast amount of content that we produce around the world every day, more accessible to our customers, and that's what I'll show you as we get a bit deeper into this. Before I do a little bit of show and tell, though, I want to talk about standards, because this is another place where the AP has really been at the forefront of this discussion around AI. Many of you may be familiar with the AP Style Book. That is sort of the Bible in journalism, the thing that you go to if you want to figure out what's the right way to describe something, what's the right phrasing to use. We want to make sure that as this conversation around AI evolves, that AP continues to help set those standards. So last year, we released a comprehensive set of AI standards. We review them monthly to make sure that we are up to date with what we're doing in our own newsroom, but where the industry is. And that gives you a sense of how fast this conversation is moving, that we have to make sure that we're reviewing those standards every month. So these are just a few of the highlights that I wanted to note here. So built into our standards, you'll see the very top of our standards, AI is not a replacement for journalists. And we believe in that strongly, that there is a crucial human element to the work that we are going to do. There has been throughout our long history, and there will continue to be, even as we build AI into our business. External content that is created by generative AI is treated as unvetted source material, the same way that we would be treating any other unvetted source material. We are not at AP transmitting any images created or altered by AI. And every time I say that one, it leads to the question, which is, well, how do you know that? How do you know that what you're transmitting is not created or altered by Gen AI? And I think the reality is that that is going to become more complex as a lot of the technology improves. So what we're spending a lot of time now, while the technology is a bit more in its infancy, is talking a lot about the basic news judgment that you need to put around these discussions. The same news judgment that we use with UGC content, the same news judgment that we use when we're interacting with any source, which is to just ask those basic questions. How did we get this? Who is the person behind this? Is there a person behind this? Those basic questions actually can be quite revelatory when you're having conversations about AI-generated content. So, I want to introduce you to Merlin. Merlin is our Gen AI search tool. And we started testing this last year, and we have now rolled this out within our own newsroom to allow our journalists to be able to search our content more quickly. But we've also rolled it out to our customers to allow them to search our content more quickly. What we've found is that AI-generated search is just better able to understand concepts. So when you type words into a search bar, you're used to getting some things that really kind of meet the mark and some things that feel a little bit off. What Gen AI can do is it can actually really discern those concepts in a more high-level way. And it can also really discern subtle differences between similar photos, and you'll see some of that in a moment. One of the other things that Merlin is able to do is to pinpoint key moments within a video, including just an hours-long video, down to the exact second. I started my career at AP as a video producer, and I often think when I'm searching in Merlin now, how much time it would have saved me if when I was searching for video, if I could have just gone to the exact second instead of, this is going to really date me, instead of having to scroll manually, through the video to find what I was looking for. The other thing that's very cool, particularly for an agency with a really deep archive, is that our older archive material, it doesn't have the same kind of modern metadata or keywords, and Gen AI is able to plow through that to help get what we need. So, here's an example, and I hope you can see this okay. So the top, you're going to see this in a couple of slides here. The top is the very top is what we're searching for. Then you're going to see the results in AI-powered search, and the bottom is without AI-powered search. So this is searching for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a U.S. lawmaker, searching for her in a crowd. That's what we want to see. We want to see her in a crowd. So you can see all of those photos. Great. AOC in a crowd. If you had done that exact same search without Merlin, you would have gotten 0 results. And that's with a deep archive of photos of AOC, but searching for her in a crowd would have revealed nothing. Here's another one. Joe Biden eating ice cream, something he does a lot. You can see that. We get a lot of photos of Joe Biden eating ice cream. If you look at the bottom, you don't even see Joe Biden in those photos. And that's what our search was like previously. I like this one too. Queen Elizabeth with corgis. Tons of photos in the AP archives of Queen Elizabeth with corgis. You can see them all there with Merlin. If you look down at the bottom there, this is the search before Merlin. Taylor Swift, not Queen Elizabeth with a corgi. Some cute corgis, no queen. So again, it just goes to show you that this search is able to just take those exact phrases and really distill it down to what you're actually looking for, as opposed to something that may have it deeper in the content. And then here's an example of what I was speaking to with the exact time codes on the video. So this is searching for Nixon. So what you're searching for here, actually you can see in the bottom there, what you're looking for will actually be at the 1 minute 39, 1 minute, or 1 minute 41 seconds. You can actually get to the moment that you need within that long video. And again, from the perspective of a former video producer, this is something that would have been pretty useful to me here. So this is something, as I said, that we are actually using at the AP right now, and it is something that is in real time saving our journalists time, allowing them to be more efficient, allowing them to, yes, produce sometimes at a higher volume, but actually then spend their time being able to dig in on the things that only they can do, making that one extra phone call to a source, making that one extra phone call to verify that something is accurate, and from our customer standpoint, allowing them to really make better use of all the vast content that we deliver to them every day.
Is this also available to AP partner newsrooms?
Yes. Yeah.
Great, all right. Got questions for you, but we're going to come back to it. Charlie Beckett.
Great, thanks a lot, Vivian. These two people that I'm sharing the platform with are absolutely pioneers in themselves, and their organizations have been doing AI in newsrooms for, as you mentioned, for a long time. I cannot compete with them in terms of case studies. So what I'm going to try and do is explain how you might approach AI, following, if you like, in their footsteps. As Vivian mentioned, I run the Journalism and AI project at the LSE. It's supported by the Google News Initiative, and we've been working on AI since 2018, which is a long time ago. And obviously things have hotted up in the last year. And over that time, we've been working with hundreds, if not thousands, of journalists right around the world. And we've been producing training courses for them. We're producing loads of case studies. If you want to see more case studies, just go to our website. And we've been doing things like the AI Fellowship, where journalists from different news organizations work on an AI challenge to try and produce a prototype or simply to research a particular area. And again, we publish all their findings online as well. So what I'm going to talk about is what I have learned from all those people, including Chris and the people at AP, over the last few years, to give a sense of how you might approach AI. So it's clear, I think this is really important. You've just heard two fantastic case studies. I think it's really important to remember that AI can be, potentially at least, a part of every aspect of news gathering, news production, and of course, critically, in news distribution. The headlines tend to go around content creation, especially when it goes wrong, but there are so many other things that it can do to support your journalistic work. We did a big survey back in 2018. We did it again last year because we wanted to kind of update our understanding of what newsrooms are doing, especially with generative AI, of course, but also what they think about it. What are the risks and opportunities, and what are the ways that they're trying to strategize it? The most obvious difference was that in that 5 years, far more newsrooms are using AI much more extensively, if you like, traditional AI, but of course, generative AI as well. And again, the variety of use cases was really interesting. I mean, here's some. One's quite a common one, summarizing articles. Some were using it, experimenting with it to analyze big data sets, of course. And one of the most effective use cases is around code development. You know, hugely helpful if you're trying to build products in your newsroom. And of course, there are bad use cases. This is my favorite. This is from Sports Illustrated, who had the genius idea of using generative AI to write stories. Loads of the stories were inaccurate and mistaken and had to be corrected or even taken down. It was an editorial disaster. Stupidity upon stupidity, though, they also used AI to create fake journalists with fake bylines and fake photos. These people do not exist. So I think they made just about every mistake. Now, the important thing here is that it was the humans that made the mistakes. They used the wrong AI, they used it in the wrong way, and they didn't take all the usual precautions to maintain editorial standards. And I think that's important. Yes, there are inherent risks around this technology. You're all familiar with its tendency to contain biases. It can be inaccurate. It's a language machine. It's not a truth machine. But it's humans that decide to use it badly. And I love this from Zach Seaward at the New York Times. He basically says, look, AI journalism goes wrong when you don't check things, when you're lazy, when you're selfish or dishonest, or you're opaque. And he says it will work if you vet the AI, if you're rigorous about the use of AI, if you think about the reader first. It's not just about your efficiency, it's about whether it makes your content more accessible, for example, to the reader. And of course, it's supposed to be truthful. We're supposed to be in the truth game, aren't we? And critically, be transparent. And by transparent, that's not just explaining to your readers that you might have used it or how you've used it, but also within the newsroom. You know, be transparent about the tools that you're using so that everybody can both share the benefits, but also that they're aware of the risks. And the great thing that we've discovered by talking to newsrooms is they are doing the right things to try and mitigate those ethical concerns. We are all campaigning to be more transparent, not just the newsrooms, but the tech companies. We want them to tell us how they built these tools and how they work. You mentioned guidelines. There are some fantastic guidelines out there, and the guidelines are really important. Firstly, of course, for your journalists, but also for your readers, your consumers. You know, they need to be reassured that if you are using this AI, that you're doing it in a responsible way. And then again, I think somebody's mentioned the human in the loop approach. Just like with any other, as you said, Julie, just like with any other act of journalism, you need to make sure that you know where the source has come from. You need to make sure that it's edited. You make sure that it's vetted, and then you go back and review it. And of course, there are going to be many, many editorial tasks that you want to keep AI free. One of them, for example, might be what's the most important story today? That's a human decision. That's not an AI decision. And then finally, this idea of collaborating. Yeah, come and talk to us. Come and talk to Shepo. Say hello, Shepo. Yeah, who manages my project. But also collaborate. One of the most interesting, I think, developments from AI has been the degree to which newsrooms are talking to each other. They're talking to universities, they're talking to startups, they're trying at least to talk to the tech companies as well. And I think that's the way forward, because we are a small industry. Even a big company like AP is relatively small compared to the tech companies, for example. So we need to learn from each other. Click on. But being optimistic, I think one of the big dangers is that you get too worried about this and that you don't seize the opportunities. You've already seen 2 fantastic demos of what you can do. The key gain, I suppose, is going to be efficiency, working more quickly, more effectively. But that as you've seen, there's some fantastic tools. Some of them are very sophisticated, but others are quite simple. I guess most of you are already using, transcription tools, translation tools to try and support your journalism. And there will be new products as well. Chatbots is the favorite one at the moment. People creating chatbots, often based on their own data that the reader can interact with. And of course, AI can be used to create disinformation and propaganda, but it can also be used to counter that. And as Julie mentioned, the big hope, I think, the optimistic case for AI is that it will allow your journalists to do what they do best, which is to be curious, to witness, to report, to have a sense of humor, to have a sense of moral outrage. All those things are done by humans, and that's what makes your journalism valuable. And also, though, a big call to use your imagination. AI can do a lot of quite boring stuff, and that's marvelous. But use it to think, because we need so desperately to come up with new ways to be more creative about our journalism, to be better at holding people to account, but also to create journalism that is relevant to people in formats that suits people's lives and the user needs. And this is just an example from the CoLab Fellowship that we're running this year, and it's a great example of using AI to counter disinformation. This is an incredibly ambitious project, the idea of doing real-time live fact-checking on video and audio. It's going to be very difficult to do this in practice, but they're going to have a great time finding out how difficult it is, but what might work as well. And that's the important part of this kind of innovation process. You won't always succeed, but you can learn so much by trying things out. And this particular project is a fantastic, I was saying to Chris, I don't know when the BBC last collaborated with News UK, but that is like, that is kind of a major diplomatic coup. And they're also working with DPA, the German Press Association, and Data Critica, who are a very small but really clever fact-checking organization based in Mexico. So you can find out all about what the CoLab teams have done in the past, and you can track their progress on our website. But this is the important thing I think about this, is that you have to think about this strategically. By all means experiment, by all means start small, don't rush, but think strategically, because as I said at the beginning, it's going to have an impact on every part of your organization. So I think it's really important that just about everybody that you work with has some information about AI, that they have some kind of understanding, partly because they're going to be using it, they are already using it, but partly because they're going to be reporting on a world where AI is going to be more important in every single field. If you're a medical reporter, it's going to be, AI is going to be involved, and you need to know how it works. Where's my slide gone? Thank you. Otherwise, I don't know what I'm talking about. The second bit is this idea of broadening AI literacy. And by that, I don't mean that you have to have some deep technical knowledge, but you need to know what AI can do and what it can't do. And you need to know how you can certainly exploit it in your newsroom, but also when you shouldn't use it and what the risks are. And I think it's really important that you assign responsibility. I think one of the lovely developments in the last year is the number of people who now have AI in their job title, because this is a rapidly moving field, and you need to have one person who talks to everybody else in your newsroom, but is also getting across the developments, getting across the research, seeing what other news organizations are doing. Then it's this idea of test, iterate, and repeat. Some tools you'll be able to just plug in and play, but generally speaking, it's all about how it fits into your news flow. And every news organization is different, so it's really important that you test it, you try it again, and then you review what's been done. We've already mentioned drawing up the guidelines, which I think is a really interesting process. It's quite a good way to say, well, what are our standards, and how might they be affected by AI, and how can we mitigate the risks? And then finally, I just repeat this idea, don't try and do it on your own. There's so many organizations. Again, the great thing about the last year is so many people, Aspen, for example, who are now interested in journalism and AI. So you are not alone. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Charlie. So I actually have, each of your presentations has elicited in me a question for each of you, and then if we have time afterwards, we'll go to the audience. So Chris, my question to you is, how you mentioned something about when you're testing these tools, you've given them to, there's a wide range of views in the newsroom about AI, and you want those that come at from every point of view to test it. How have your colleagues embraced it? What concerns have they expressed? I mean, your approach is obviously so careful with it, but what's been the response?
Well, I mean, I think quite naturally, often the case is if you go to a department and say, do you think Gen AI might help you in your jobs? Often the response is, probably not us, but have you thought about that department over there, right? It's very natural, completely understandable. I mean, there really is a range of views. It's crucial to say, and that it should be no surprise. And frankly, I don't see a downside to being cautious right now. I do not believe that the first news organization to deploy a very elaborate Gen AI product is going to be the one that wins journalism. And so I think it's good to think about the cultural aspect of it, right? And hopefully what we showed there is testament to our aim, which I think is to be as responsible and thoughtful as possible when looking at this technology. So I want to talk to people who think it's an abomination. I think that's how Nick Cave described it when one of one of his fans shared a Nick Cave-esque AI song, it's a completely legitimate response to it. I also think it's important to say that in 5 years' time, it is entirely possible that journalists will be doing amazing work and actively trying not to use this stuff. I also think it's possible that they will be using this stuff without necessarily realizing that they're using it too.
I think that latter is probably the more likely if I were betting. Julie, my question to you is: you've created these incredible search tools. I can't imagine there's much resistance in your newsrooms to better search. What's not to
Very
like?
little.
So I want to ask you more about. I wish I could ask you all this, but all of you the same question, but we don't have time. Who do you partner with on this? Is everything built in-house, or do you have? I know you have a relationship with OpenAI. I don't know if that plays in here.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it was one of the things that we talked about a lot at the beginning and still continue to talk about. How much are we going to do in-house and how much are we going to do with partners? And I think that it was very clear from the start that for us to move a lot of the actual development work in-house was, one, going to be very expensive and something that was going to take away from the core of what we do really well, which is news gathering and news production, and two, that the technology was going to move so fast that by the time we went out and hired a team of developers, maybe the skills that they had and what they were working on would have moved past. So we've really embraced a partnership model. I think it's one that a lot of news organizations are trying to do. So there's a small team in-house that is working on development, but it is all in partnership. And I think that right now we're trying to cast a pretty wide net because I think not only is the technology moving fast, but the players are changing quickly. And you have some big technology companies that have some great tools that they are developing. And then you have really interesting startups that are popping up. And we want to be in those conversations as well. And so I think that because we don't know exactly where this is going to go, making sure that we can stay nimble enough by not having to do all the investment and all of the work ourselves, we feel is the right strategy for us.
So can you say who you partner with other than OpenAI, which has been?
We definitely are working with, I would say, sort of all of the big tech platforms, and then there are a range of small organizations, and then Merlin is a partner organization that we're working with.
Okay. Great, thanks. Actually, I want to just come back to you with the same question, Chris, about building things in-house and partnership. So for the things that you have demonstrated, wincing.
Yeah, so what I've demonstrated is obviously not everything that we've been doing, and there are some things I can't talk about. But yes, you do exactly what Julie's saying. You can't do this all yourself. You saw the size of our team, right? There will be some news organizations who say how lucky you are to have that size of team, but it's tiny when you're talking about these kinds of challenges. So, yes, we are open-minded about that, interested, but I also think the kind of work that Charlie's doing, bringing news organizations together to try and tackle quite a lot of shared problems, right, is really important too there.
Fantastic. Charlie, the two demos that we saw, or more than two really, what Julie showed us and what Chris showed us are both internal tools. Who, other than, you demonstrated who is doing external facing tools and news gathering badly, of course. Fake journalists, probably not a good idea. But have you seen anything that is consumer facing, using AI, that you would point to as a really exciting or interesting, worthy experiment?
Yeah, well, I think some of it is quite routine. The summarization piece, for example, sounds a bit dull, but we had one team that built a summarization tool so that each of their long articles had a little paragraph at the top automatically generated which said what the article was about. And what was fascinating was the articles didn't get more clicks, they didn't get less clicks either, but they got read much more, because you were basically saying, hey, there's this really good article here, more detail than a headline that was like a teaser, and that actually boosted consumption. But I think the chatbot thing is really interesting. There are so many people building these now, and they're often, as I say, doing it with their own data, with their own journalism. And I think what's interesting about that is that it doesn't say, here's the news. It says, what do you want to find out? So it empowers the reader to get the information that they want, rather than having to scroll through your app or your website. And I think that's quite an interesting power shift, actually. And I think that's going to provide really interesting data for newsrooms to find out, well, what are our readers asking today? You know, I find that very exciting.
Go ahead.
Just to chime in on that, I think in that particular example, there's a really interesting kind of quandary for news organizations. One of the things that all of us have effectively been saying here is, as a news organization, this technology is not as scalable and not as useful and doesn't bring as many efficiencies as it would to an organization that does not care about the truth and has no interest in that. So the chatbot example is right. In terms of the user facility, it's really great that you might be able to ask a specific question about Ukraine and it pulls in information from 3 different places. But that's a very large leap for an organization, well, all of our organizations, where we live and die by knowing that we are accountable for what we have published, versus a situation where that chatbot, you are not going to be able to monitor exactly what it says in every single situation.
Yeah, I would imagine even for the summaries that you're talking about, automated summaries, those are checked by editors, I have to imagine.
Sorry,
the automated summaries at the top of the articles that you mentioned, those are checked by editors, I assume.
Yeah, I mean, everything is checked. You know, everything is checked, but it still saves you a huge amount of time because it does it for you first.
Right. I think we have time. Nope, no questions. No, we have time for okay. I was going to go to questions. Sorry about that. I just want to say, one question. Okay, we have time for one question. Sorry, I'm not reading the sign language very well.
Who's got the best question?
God, no pressure. And a question, please, a question. Okay, here we go. Please say your name.
Yeah,
your
hi,
affiliation.
Vivian Walt. I'm a journalist based in Paris for major US media. I wanted to ask a question. Given the history of the internet and what we know about the state of the media industry, how do you monetize some of these tools you're building? It seems so critical that here we are at another pivot point. Can we learn the lessons of the bad history of the rise of the internet and actually make the AI pivot point turn out in a very different way?
I mean, I'm happy to take part of that. I think that one of the things that I think is positive about this moment for the industry, at least in the conversations that we're having and that I've been involved in with other news organizations, is that we're having that exact conversation. I think that what happened to the industry at the kind of advent of the internet is a real lesson learned for people, you know, both because from a technology standpoint, we recognize we can't let this sit back and wash over us, right? We have to be players in this space. And I think that that is going to mean, I talk about this a lot in our newsroom, that is going to mean that we're going to make some mistakes. And it does mean we're going to try some things and they're not going to work and we're going to have to try new things, but we have to be engaged. We can't turn this over to technology companies if we want to survive this. So I think that's one crucial piece of it. I think the other is we are having that conversation about how does this support our business model, or how does it change our business model and allow us to drive revenue in another way? And it's okay as newsrooms to talk about how you make money. It's okay to talk about yourself as a business. In fact, if you're not talking about yourself as a business, then you're probably not going to survive, because as mission driven as I am, as I think most of us are, you know, mission doesn't get you money, and mission doesn't pay the bills, and mission doesn't pay the salaries. So I think we don't know exactly what the revenue model will be, but the fact that it's part of this conversation in its infancy is, I think, a positive development.
Go ahead, Chris.
That's a brilliant answer. I think the only thing I'd add in terms of business models is actually the urgent question there is less what we do with it and more what the platforms do with it. And that is a whole other panel.
That is a whole other conference, I think, not just a whole other panel. I want to just thank everybody, thank our panelists for sharing all these great examples and words, and thank you to the audience very much.